In October 2024, something unexpected appeared on Tubi that made more than 2 million people stop scrolling and stare. It was a piece of footage that had been locked away for over 40 years inside studio vaults. The network always said it was too emotional, too raw, too personal to ever be shown on television. But finally, after decades of silence, they released it. Viewers were stunned when they watched Red Skelton's final performance, because he didn't treat it like a comedy show. He treated it like a confession booth. He spoke directly into the camera as if he were talking to a therapist. He revealed things he had never told the world before: family tragedies, private heartbreaks, career secrets, and deep personal failures. Many people said it felt like reading someone's private diary, the type of diary that was never supposed to be seen. And everyone wondered the same thing. Why now? Why did the network finally decide the world needed to see it? To understand that moment, you have to understand the man behind it. Red Skelton was born on July 18, 1913, in a tiny, cramped shack in Vincennes, Indiana. His life started with loss. Just 2 months before he was born, his father died from heart failure at only 37 years old. His father had been a clown in the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus, a man who spent his life entertaining others with laughter, but at home, that joy never seemed to reach his own family. After he died, Red's mother was left alone with 4 young boys and almost nothing to her name. They lost the small store they owned and had to depend on neighbors, friends, and the kindness of strangers just to get through each week. Red grew up wearing worn-out clothes, going to bed hungry, and feeling like he carried the weight of being the poorest kid in school. But he discovered something early. Laughter could soften almost any hardship. Humor became his shield, not because he wanted attention, but because it helped him survive the days that felt too heavy. That hunger from childhood left a mark on him. It shaped his voice, his face, his sense of timing, and even his understanding of the truth behind jokes. By the age of 7, he was already standing on street corners selling newspapers just to bring in pennies. He did anything he could to earn money, sang, swept floors, shouted jokes to attract customers, and sometimes even begged. By the time he was 10, he was juggling multiple jobs like a grown man. He delivered ice blocks, carried cigar boxes, scrubbed laundry, and walked long, exhausting miles trying to bring home just a few coins. He watched mothers pawn their wedding rings to buy bread. He watched children go to school barefoot. His own schooling came in small pieces, squeezed between work shifts and constant setbacks. But every time he made someone laugh, he felt a connection he never forgot. He became known around town, not for being a good student, but for the way he could make even the saddest or most broken man laugh like a child again. At age 10, his life took another turn. He ran away with a traveling medicine show led by Doc Airey Lewis. That summer, he performed skits and helped sell bottles of fake cure-all tonics for $10 a week. He slept in barns and wagons and lived like an adult even though he was still a child. And he sent every dollar home to his mother. One night, he accidentally slipped off the stage and smashed a whole case of glass bottles. The audience roared with laughter, and Red realized something important, that even mistakes could become magic if he allowed them to. He stayed with that show for 4 years and learned everything he could about performing. He absorbed tricks, gags, accents, pantomime, juggling, anything that could help him entertain a crowd. He learned how to be poor without bitterness, how to perform without applause, and how to laugh without needing a reason. His father remained a mystery to him, someone he never met and only knew through stories. People described his father as a man covered in grease paint, weighed down by exhaustion, who died too young in a world that demanded too much. Red held on to those stories like they were scripture. Whenever he saw a circus tent or a dressing room mirror, he searched for a connection with a father he never touched. That longing shaped everything he later brought to the stage. At 15, he dropped out of school. He had only $1.35 in his pocket and a vague promise of work from a burlesque comic in Chicago. He hitchhiked out of Vincennes carrying nothing but a small suitcase, a dream, and the memory of his mother's quiet nod of approval. She didn't try to stop him. She understood that some children run toward a future because they already know what it means to be left behind. Red worked anywhere he could: circuses, nightclubs, sidewalks, and dance halls. He performed through the Great Depression like a man racing against time. At 16, he joined the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus, the same circus where his father once performed. He didn't just work under the big tent. He felt like he belonged there. The smell of sawdust, the sounds of the crowd, the tension before a punchline. Those moments were where he learned who he truly was. He joined a silent vaudeville act called the Merry Mutes as a drummer, but he wasn't allowed to speak on stage. Instead, he used his face, his body, and his movement to tell stories. He mimed, he fell, he danced, he copied animals and actors. Even without words, he could make people feel something. That skill would become one of his greatest strengths. By 1931, he and his partner Bud Jones added spoken lines to their act. Red performed impressions of Clark Gable that brought down the house. They earned an impressive $75 a week, which was nearly unheard of in the Depression era. But then Bud betrayed him, and the act collapsed. Red was heartbroken. He lost not only a job but also a rhythm he had built his life around. He went back to performing at dance marathons and walkathons just to get by. But in the middle of that heartbreak, he met Edna Stillwell, a young usher who understood comedy better than most professionals. She was only 13 when they met, and he was 21, but she had an incredible talent for writing punchlines and shaping sketches. They married in 1934 and quickly became a team. Edna wrote material, booked dates, and handled business. Together they created Guzzler's Gin, a sketch about a man hiding alcohol from his wife. The audience loved it. Soon, clubs in Chicago wanted Red on their stage. By 1937, they were earning $2,000 a week. But success puts pressure on marriages, and theirs was no exception. Behind the scenes, cracks were forming. In 1937, Red joined a radio program called The Avalon Time. He created a character named Clem Kadiddlehopper, a slow-talking farm boy who became an instant hit. Audiences loved the innocence and silliness of Clem. The show's ratings jumped, stores began selling Kadiddlehopper merchandise, and children all over America copied his phrases. By 1941, NBC gave Red his own show. The Red Skelton Show reached 20 million listeners every week. In just 15 minutes per episode, he played multiple characters, each one funnier than the last. But the pressure caught up with him. In 1943, during a live broadcast, Red collapsed on stage. He later said he thought he heard his father's voice telling him to keep going even as his body finally gave out. Doctors diagnosed him with exhaustion. But emotionally, the moment marked the darkest point in his career. When he eventually returned, his comedy had changed. It carried a deeper tone, a kind of sadness hidden underneath the laughter. Red's most controversial character became the mean Whittle Kid, a rude, mischievous child who spoke sharply and acted out. Audiences laughed hard, but the FCC complained. Parents said it was too violent or disrespectful. Red refused to water it down. He believed comedy should show real life, even the messy parts. And oddly, the controversy only made the character more popular. By 1944, Red was earning $10,000 a week, but money didn't protect him from his weaknesses. He developed a gambling habit and once lost $50,000 in a single night in Las Vegas. He sat at the table empty, drained, unable to joke. It took years to recover from that mistake. His movie career took off in the early 1940s. Even when he played small roles, he stole scenes with pantomime and expressions. By 1943, he received his first major leading role, and the film made millions. He used new visual tricks, including early stop-motion techniques, which made audiences fall in love with his style. But behind the scenes, tragedy struck when he learned that his infant son Richard had leukemia. Red continued making movies, but crew members sometimes found him crying alone off camera. The pain stayed with him for years. When Richard died at 9 years old, Red said nothing in his life was ever the same again. Even after enormous success with films like The Fuller Brush Man, Red struggled under MGM's strict control. The studio expected obedience. When he refused a role in 1951 because he wanted artistic control, MGM suspended him. But his stand helped change the way Hollywood treated actors. Television brought him back to millions of households. His show became a weekly tradition filled with mime, music, soldiers, and heartfelt comedy. One character, Freddie the Freeloader, a kind homeless man with a limp and a smile, became one of the most beloved characters on television. Red based Freddie on someone he met when he was poor in Chicago. The character barely spoke, but he didn't need to. People saw hope in him. And then, in 1957, Red's personal life shattered. His wife Edna, who had been his partner, his writer, his protector, and his manager, confessed that she had been having an affair with his producer. Red reached a breaking point one night. He lost control, punched a hotel wall, and broke his hand. Because of the injury, he missed 2 episodes of his own show. The press turned the whole situation into a major scandal. Fans who always saw him as a warm, family-friendly comedian were shocked. They couldn't believe that the man who made them laugh every week was struggling so deeply behind the scenes. Even though he remarried a few months later, the public image he had built for years was damaged. People no longer saw him only as the cheerful clown. They now saw a man who was hurting inside. His show's ratings dropped for a while, but it didn't completely fall apart. Viewers still tuned in because they needed the comfort and joy his comedy brought them, even when they knew he was facing personal battles. In 1958, Red created a new character named George Appleby. George was a husband who always got pushed around, complained about smog, dealt with constant nagging, and felt unheard by everyone around him. The character struck a chord with millions. Some nights, nearly 40 million people watched. George was funny, but he also revealed something honest about ordinary people who felt ignored by the world. Around this time, Red's famous clown voice began to suffer because of years of heavy smoking. His vocal strength started to fade, so he switched to relying more on silent acting and physical comedy. Instead of speaking, he expressed everything through movement. His pantomime grew sharper and more impressive. What seemed like a weakness at first became the very thing that kept audiences glued to their screens. People loved watching what he could do without saying a single word. In 1962, he moved his show to CBS. That year, he won an Emmy for his writing. He openly poked fun at suburban life, made jokes about himself, and laughed at the absurd things happening in the world. But the network wanted him to push further. They asked for jokes about politics, divorce, and controversial issues. Red didn't want to offend anyone. He didn't see himself as the kind of comedian who stirred trouble. All he wanted was to make people laugh, not divide them. Still, he tried to adjust, and his sketches slowly became a mix of silliness and seriousness. Winning that Emmy marked a turning point. He was still the clown people adored, but he now carried a deeper message under the makeup. By 1965, he reached the height of his popularity. Each week, nearly 50 million viewers tuned into his show. To boost things even further, he invited John Wayne to guest star. Red performed hilarious Western spoofs, brought back fan-favorite characters, and revived old routines. But the audience wanted something new, color TV. At first, Red resisted the shift. He thought it was nothing more than a flashy trend. Eventually, he accepted the change, and the show transitioned to color. That same year, he created a special retrospective episode with John Wayne and many of his most beloved sketches. It aired as the scrapbook and became one of the most watched episodes of his entire career. Red was back on top, even though younger, edgier comedians were starting to dominate the entertainment world. Then in 1969, everything changed. CBS decided to go after younger viewers. Even though Red's show was still successful, they canceled it. The network replaced him with shows they believed fit the new era. Red didn't give up. He moved to NBC for one more season. His final show aired on May 19, 1971. At the end of the episode, he said goodbye in a soft, emotional voice. The laughter faded, but the respect and affection remained. His last episode marked the end of a television era. Only 2 years later, in 1973, Red faced a financial crisis. The IRS revealed that he owed $1.2 million in back taxes. Bad investments and poor money management had caught up to him. At 60 years old, he was forced to sell his beautiful Palm Springs home. To pay off the debt, he went back on the road, performing in casinos and small venues. He entertained crowds who remembered him from his TV glory days. The glamour was gone, but his dedication to performing never faded. Articles often talked about how he was struggling to stay financially stable. Behind the painted smile, he was pushing himself harder than ever. In 1976, Red found hope again. NBC gave him a chance to create several specials under the title Funny Faces. He brought back characters like Clem Kadiddlehopper, updating their comedy for a new audience. The specials sold extremely well in syndication, earning around $500,000. For the first time in years, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. People still loved him. They still laughed at his characters. Clem still had the magic. But the same year, tragedy hit again. Red's second wife, Georgia, passed away. Heartbroken, he turned to painting. Over time, he created more than 500 oil portraits, many featuring his most famous characters. In 1980, he held an exhibition in Las Vegas where he sold around 200 paintings for $5,000 each. The gallery was filled with fans. It wasn't just about money. Painting became the way he processed grief and stayed emotionally alive. People who attended the exhibit felt the same warmth and sincerity in his art that they once saw in his performances. In 1981, during a show at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas, Red collapsed backstage. He had slipped back into drinking and nearly lost his life. Friends and colleagues worried deeply about him. The stage had once been his place of healing, but now it was wearing him down. Still, he came back. He always did. Performing wasn't something he did for fame. It was something he needed to feel alive. Later that year, he filmed Freddie the Freeloader's Christmas Dinner for HBO. The special aired on December 13, 1981, and featured Vincent Price and Imogene Coca. The story was simple and touching. Freddie just wanted to share a holiday meal with a friend. The special cost only $200,000 to produce, but 5 million people tuned in. It was gentle, heartfelt, and overflowing with warmth, just like Red. In 1982, he filmed another Funny Faces special with the legendary French mime Marcel Marceau. Together, they performed a 30-minute silent comedy duel. Just before filming, vandals destroyed the grave of Red's son Richard Jr. Red didn't speak publicly about the pain, but it was obvious he carried it heavily. Yet when the cameras rolled, he performed with flawless grace, making audiences laugh without revealing the grief pushing down on him. In 1983, he created Funny Faces 3. That same year, Red opened up about something he had kept private for decades. Back in June 1944, he had enlisted and spent 18 months performing for soldiers in Europe. He had done shows in blackout conditions during wartime, brought laughter to bomb shelters, and spoken on armed forces radio. Few people knew he had served, but now it became part of his story. The public saw him differently, not just as a comedian, but as someone who had quietly supported troops during one of the darkest moments in history. Also in 1983, on his 70th birthday, Red performed at the Royal Albert Hall in London for Queen Elizabeth II. He told stories, acted out sketches, and even played drums in honor of his father. The event was filmed for HBO and aired in 1984. Like always, the production was simple and affordable, but the joy and laughter in the room were priceless. His farewell specials in the early 1980s each cost around $200,000 to create and had audiences of about 5 million. They were filmed in Toronto and aired on HBO. Simple shows, but filled with heart. Two of the standout specials were Freddie the Freeloader's Christmas Dinner and the Royal Command performance. Red's life may have seemed full of laughter, but beneath his painted smile, he carried more pain than most people ever realized. In 1957, when he divorced his first wife, Edna Marie Stilwell, the newspapers didn't reflect how devastating the situation truly was. Edna wasn't just his wife. She had been his manager, writer, and emotional anchor. Their daughter, Valentina, was only 10 and became caught in a painful custody battle. Edna accused Red of being cold and distant. Red claimed Edna turned their daughter against him. The court sided with Edna. Red cried openly in court. Some days, he even showed up wearing clown makeup because he didn't know how else to cope with the heartbreak. Reporters assumed it was a publicity stunt, but it wasn't. It was the only way he could express the pain he couldn't speak aloud. Then, only months later, tragedy struck again. In May 1958, Red's 9-year-old son, Richard, was diagnosed with leukemia. Doctors told Red and his wife Georgia there was nothing they could do to save him. Red and Georgia stayed by his side at UCLA Medical Center, watching helplessly as his small body weakened. On May 10th, just before his 10th birthday, Richard passed away. Red canceled his show. Johnny Carson temporarily replaced him. Off-screen, Red fell silent. The joy in him faded. By 1961, grief consumed him so deeply that he tried to end his own life using sleeping pills. Doctors saved him, but he was never the same. From then on, he channeled all of his sorrow into helping others. In 1963, he created the Red Skelton Classic Learning Center for Children, hoping to give other young people the future his son never had. His marriage to Lothian Toland in 1963 became surrounded by rumors and ended in 1971. In 1973, he married Georgia Davis, and for a short time, he found some warmth again. But in 1976, Georgia died from cancer. Red retreated from the world. For nearly 3 years, he stayed away from cameras, audiences, and stages. He lived in quiet sadness. In January 1986, Red was involved in a terrible car accident in Palm Desert. He was 73 years old. His ribs cracked, his legs shattered, and his face was badly bruised. He remained in the hospital for weeks and had several surgeries. Although he made jokes to reporters, privately he feared this might be the end of his ability to perform. It took months before he could walk again. Slowly, without complaints, he faded away from public life. By 1990, doctors told him that his lungs were failing due to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. He had smoked for decades. He quit smoking immediately, calling it the hardest challenge of his life. In his final years, he turned fully to painting. He created more than 50,000 pieces. He sold many of them and donated the earnings to children's hospitals. Painting became his voice when words no longer came easily. Red Skelton passed away on September 17, 1997. Yet his legacy didn't stop with his death. In 1986, Lucille Ball honored him with the Governor's Award at the 38th Emmy Awards. Even though it had been 16 years since his show was canceled, the industry hadn't forgotten him. He also received an honorary degree from Ball State University that year, followed by a Screen Actors Guild Award in 1987. A new wave of appreciation began. People who had grown up watching him as children now returned as adults. They saw the sadness behind his smile and loved him even more. By 1989, interest in his work grew again. 3 missing episodes of his show were discovered. The next year, 60 more were added to a VHS collection called The Lost Episodes. These came from old storage rooms and private collectors who had kept them untouched for decades. These episodes weren't ordinary reruns. They were pieces of television history that people thought were lost forever. In 2013, more than 200 hours of unaired kinescope footage was found in Indiana. These reels included sketches censored during the 1950s because they touched on topics like racism and civil rights. Red had written them and fought to air them, but networks refused. He saved them privately, and decades later, they finally saw the light. The world discovered that Red was deeper, braver, and more socially aware than anyone had imagined. His artwork also gained new life. By 2020, some of his paintings, especially those of Freddie the Freeloader, were selling for up to $1 million. The Skelton estate donated more than 1,000 pieces to museums. A $4 million gallery was built in his honor. The man who once painted simply to survive his grief had now created a permanent artistic legacy. In 2024, the Paley Center for Media revealed behind-the-scenes footage from his final TV episode in 1971, including outtakes and emotional moments with Carol Burnett. These clips showed a side of Red he never intended the public to see, laughing, crying, stumbling over lines, and being his true self. Then came the most powerful discovery of all. In October 2024, Tubi released a collection called Red Skelton, the Farewell Specials, Uncensored Edition. Within the first week, more than 2 million people watched. These were restored clips from 1981 and 1982 that had never been broadcast. One long scene from Freddie the Freeloader's Christmas dinner featured Red talking unscripted, tears running down his face. He spoke about his father, who died before he was born, and about his son Richard. He admitted he never recovered from the loss. Viewers said watching it felt like opening someone's private diary. He also confessed that when he was 16 years old, he spent months traveling with the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus. He stole routines, jokes, and clown scripts, memoizing everything because he wanted to survive. Through laughter and tears, he said, "If I hadn't stolen those scripts, I'd still be selling soap on the streets." The raw footage was restored in 4K. Every small movement of his hands, every subtle twitch in his silent performances was preserved. The restoration team spent more than a year cleaning and stabilizing each frame. Thanks to them, a new generation discovered the magic of Red Skelton, his silence, his humor, and the heart that never faded behind the painted smile.